this really exciting advanced methods training, which is suitable for PhD researchers, for early career colleagues, and also really for anyone in any stage of career who is interested to learn more about research. So, and in particular, I'm absolutely delighted to have the privilege of introducing Mark Saunders, Professor Mark Saunders, to you today. Mark is an incredible academic, a distinguished methodologist, an amazing human being and friend. He's reminded me that we've known each other for 15 years. In fact, Mark gave me my first lectureship, was part of the interview panel. He then acted as my mentor and basically saved my skin when things went terribly wrong with our employer, because he wrote my probation targets in a very smart way. And there's lessons learned for anybody starting out an academic career: get your probation targets written in a smart way. And if you can, get an amazing mentor like Mark, although there are not as many special as Mark around. But yes, most importantly, Mark is an incredible colleague, but he's also here today as a distinguished methodologist. His reputation, I believe, almost doesn't need an introduction, but if anybody hasn't heard, he's an author of more than 30 books. He's got a medal from the British Academy of Management for his leadership in supporting doctoral students, helping doctoral research. He's a fellow of the British Academy of Management. His Research Methods for Business Students book, now in its 9th edition, received the accolade of being Financial Times #1 teaching power resource. He's written more than 150 journals articles, if you like numbers. And if you want to be really humble, and compare your Google profile to Mark's, then I believe he's just reached 95,000 citations. So, but as I said, these sort of numbers are nothing compared to what Mark actually does as a methodologist, because he opens things up, he gives people hope, he supports colleagues, he always has time for people. So I can carry on talking, but I think what I really want is for you to listen to Mark. So I hand over to you, Mark. Thank you so much for coming, Mark, and being with us today.
Thanks, Alan. Can you sort of do the slide and do those? Colleagues, firstly, I know it's a small room, but I basically taught too many large lectures and I destroyed my vocal cords quite well, so this is about as good as it gets. So apologies for that. Yeah, I'm Mark Saunders, or as my son told me at the age of 10, Professor Slaphead. And I think that puts it more reality of it. We're all human beings. How many doctoral students do we have in the room? Hands up, please. Yay. You guys are the future, remember that. How many people who have academic jobs, properish? One, two, three. You're the past. Oh, sorry. No, seriously, no. Being more realistic, your job is to enable these people to get further there than possible. In terms of what we're going to be doing this afternoon, Alex said I could talk for about an hour and a half-ish, but that's going to be interspersed with your questions. Whenever you want to ask a question, do. If I don't catch your eye, just shout. And I may plead the Fifth Amendment. I may also say it will come later, but we will deal with all the questions we go through. And the only stupid question is the one you don't ask. However, if you start a question with, I'm finding your presentation very interesting, but you know what that really means. You want to talk about yourself rather than ask a question. So we're not going to do this. Right. I'm not going to talk much more about me. Alex has basically embarrassed me too much already. But let's just say what we're going to be looking at is basically not probability sampling or sampling for qualitative research. So not the statistical side of sampling, the other side. And we're going to go to this. I think if I got paid £1 for every time somebody asked that question, I wouldn't have to work anymore. It's the question, how many interviews do I have to do? I haven't got enough yet. So we're going to answer that, but along the way, we're going to do some other things. Alex is operating the clicky bit for me because she wants it to be powerful. So we're going to have a little bit of definitions at the beginning just to get ourselves straight, so we're talking about the same stuff. And then we're going to talk about techniques and issues with non-probability sampling, because I think it's useful just to get background. And all the way through this slides. You can have a copy of the slides afterwards as well. The presentation's been recorded, but in addition to that, you'll see on the bottom right-hand side, you see a name. But more seriously, you have that's basically, there's a YouTube channel which you may or may not come across, which has got about 55 videos on it about different aspects and methods. And a lot of this stuff that's on here is in different forms on that channel. Please do look at it. And if you're very nice, just subscribe, because it helps to get more people to use them. So we're going to look at sampling techniques, then we're going to go down to interviews, what they're like and nature. And then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of answering that question. We're going to be looking at it very much from the level of doing publishable research. So we're talking about stuff you do at doctoral level, stuff you do when you're writing journal articles and so on. And we're going to come through, look at what's actually happened in the past, look at what experts have said, which I can translate. I think it's about like that. There's not a lot of data out there. Then we look at the work which I did with a great friend of mine, Keith Townsend, who's at Griffith University in Brisbane. I have some recommendations at the end of it. And these are the sorts of journals Keith and I were looking at when we did the empirical part of what I'm talking about. So let's jump along that, please. Oh, yes, let's have a nice little picture. So, you're all stars, aren't you? So you're the population of everybody in this room. Let's look again, Alex. In fact, we could say you're all cases. You can decide whether that's a head case or a case in sample terms. But in sampling language, you're called cases or elements. And let's click again. And sometimes what we have is a target population. So we could have said our population is all students everywhere in the world. But our target population would be ones which are actually easier to get to, which are sort of representative. Our target population might be all doctoral students in the Open University. And click again. And the sample we selected is a few in between. So we're narrowing it down. And this is all about selecting. Now, in statistical terms, we select samples to be representative, in some way statistically representative. And the idea we can do stuff in proportions and do stats. And we need large numbers of sample to make the stats work. I'm not going to talk about that. Click again, please. And again. What we're going to be talking about is down this side, non-probability, or sometimes called non-random samples. So a couple of definitions. Just happy. Click again, please, Alex. Right. Selection, where the chance of each being selected is known and it's not zero. So that's the probability sampling. So to do that, you have to have a list. And we know very well that for most of the work we do, we cannot get a complete list of all our population or even our target population. So that basically means tough, we can't do that. But what we can do is we can use non-probability sampling in one way or another to select people we want to collect data from, or the organisation we want to collect data from, and so on. So we can do it, but we don't know what the probability or the chance is. So we can't use those statistical inference techniques to infer from the sample to the population, except when we're using one form of sampling, and they tend to use it when they're doing quota sampling. We'll click again. Oh yes, and this is the advantage of having somebody clicking. You forget what you're doing because you can't see what's coming up next on the screen. But when you're selecting non-probability sample, you're selecting with a reason in mind. You're saying, I'm selecting this sample too. What's the reason in mind coming from? Where's that reason you're selecting your sample coming from? What drives all your research? Everything you do, it drives it. Without that, you can't even be doing research. What's driving it? What are you doing research to do? Yeah, thank you. So the purpose in mind comes from a research question. And that is probably the most difficult thing you'll ever have to do to get right. You'll come up with a question and you have to refine it and go back and forth. Many years ago, when I first started lecturing, having had as my daughter tells me, a proper job, we used to spend 2 days just working with students on research questions. Now they get half an hour. it's really crucial to spend time getting that question right and getting questions which actually force you to explain rather than describe. So the word why, if you're a parent, it's a horrible word, because it's what your kids say to you all the time, why? But it's also a brilliant word because you have to explain. So questions need that. That was a slight digression, and Alex knows I tend to digress. Alex had the disadvantage of sitting through so many of my methods classes, we teaching together in Surrey. Mind you, her philosophy classes are the best I've ever listened to. She's amazing. It's true. Have you listened to Alex on philosophy yet? Do you agree with me? Give her a round of applause. See which is amazing on philosophy. I learned so much. Next slide, please, before we get too red. So, click again, please. So we talked about quote samples. That's the first one. And then we're going to go through and work our way through the other ones. But let's do that quick. And we have purpose in there. So purpose, the reason why. So I said, we selected on what we sample the reason why. So we could be selecting it because we want to look at extreme cases, intensity, come into these models, working. These words I find an absolute pain to get out. So I'm going to have a go. If I don't, you can read it anyway. There's heterogeneous. Thank you. Yes, please do it for me. Loudly.
Heterogeneous.
Thank you. And the other one's homogeneous. I got the second one now because you helped me with the first.
Homogeneous.
Yay! That's it, right. So what we've got is different types. I'm going to look at each of these just to give an idea. And these are just some of them. If you read Michael Patton's book, he's got about 30, 40 different types of purpose sampling, but these tend to be the main ones being used. So let's just click again to that. Then we have volunteer sampling for difficult to reach groups where we actually ask people to volunteer to be part of it. And then we have the one which, if I ever read it, I get really worried. Click again, please.
Trying to work out if people online can hear you.
Yeah,
We did check them.
yeah, we check with them, but yeah,
Are they all
they can hear a bit of patches. So if just like keep the microphone at the same level.
Okay.
Try not to.
Is it coming in closer to the lectern?
Let's see.
Try.
Does this help? Does that help?
We can hear you so well, Francesca. Yeah, but yeah, it's the microphone that interacts. So.
If I hold it like this, it's me. I've got to hold it right next to the mouth. Which
Is
could
it
be
better, guys? Now they're writing on the chat.
Let's see what they say.
Now it is better.
Okay, so it's holding right next to my mouth. And we have haphazard at the end. Things that want to be inconvenience. This is parody of a typical master student. Oh dear, my dissertation's due tomorrow. I haven't got my data yet. I need 10 interviews. Will you be will you role play the person I need to get data? It's convenient, but it's useless. So we've got the pipes to look at, but let's click on a bit more detail. Quota sampling. And we have a definition. But the easiest way to think of quota sampling is you're in Milton Keynes, you're walking through a big shopping centre, and this person comes up to you and they say, would you mind answering a few questions, please? And you're nice. So you say, yeah, all right. And then they look at you and they say, are you male? And you say, yep. And then they ask you about your age and they ask other aspects, demographics. What they're trying to do is to build up a quota of so many men, so many women, so many who would perhaps classify themselves as other in those groups, different ages, so that it represents the population of interest. So trying to make it representative on demographics. The idea being by representing demographics, it represents the total population there when you get your data in proportion still. So though you can't officially use statistics, people do. And they tend to be large numbers. So we see there about these quota variables of age, sex, occupation, quite often geographic location. And then we might look at firm size, and people talk about full-time employees, often their industry sector, geographical location, and it's proportional. So used quite a lot, but then once you get into that, back into doing statistical analysis, which is not what we're going to be talking about today, but it's there for completeness. Let's click again. Purpose of sampling. It's non-probability, it's judgment. So it goes back to your research question. What are you trying to do in terms of the research? What's the answer you're trying to find? Still having to go that side.
Yeah.
When I was, oh gosh, do you remember a band called Queen? I saw them in Oxford when they had their second album out in the days we had vinyl. And Freddie Mercury did, because on one side of the stage was the Now I'm Here and the spotlight's on him. Then it was Now I'm There, and the voice still came up to the side, but he was on the other side. So I'm feeling a bit like that at the moment. You get it. Thank you very much for the smile. So, perfect sampling. We can look at which is critical to answer your research question, which groups are critical. We can look at, let's look at the extremes. We can talk about why extremes might be useful. Your job. Next word, please. Right, that word, I can't read it.
Heterogeneity.
Thank you, and homogeneity as well. So wide variety or very similar. And then the crucial thing is the arguments we put there behind it to enable us to answer that question as to why these samples are good to answer our questions. Without that, we haven't got any justification. So it's about being able to think and justify. It's difficult, in other words. You're not just following rules, you're actually explaining why. And we're looking at much, much smaller samples. So we're not looking at hundreds, we're looking at tens or even less. We'll look about the actual numbers as well. And we're trying to get a lot of information from each of the elements or cases in our sample. So, extreme cases. So we take something which is really weird and different on the basis, if we look at that extreme, we'll be able to better understand it because it will reveal insights which will help us understand the typical more. So you have to think, is this appropriate, what we're trying to do? That's difficult, isn't it? You've got to actually have justifications rather than saying, I'm doing this, I'm following rules. So it's all down to the argument. So, you know, let's have an extreme. Let's look at the person who is performing best of all, or the company that's performing best of all. And what do we learn from that? And we know that that is always very sensible. In the 80s, 90s, do you remember Peter and Waterman? They looked in search of excellence. They looked at the most excellent companies and said, go ye and do likewise. And 10 years later, most of those companies have gone bust. So sometimes looking at extremes in such a way. Because you can't clearly afford. But you have to say, what's the basis of this unusual? And crucially, you have to spend time on this. And we've got the difference, you see, between extreme as best performer and intensity, which is sort of going down the stage. So not the very best, but here the ones that do even well, do consistently well. We've got different labels, so you can start to make yourselves clever. Hey, I'm doing an intensity sampling. What the hell's that? But you see, you're starting to know the language to show that you know your craft as a researcher. Let's click on it again. Go through, please. You get the word now. We're looking for maximum variation. So, every single one of those cakes needs to be in the sample for maximum variation, doesn't it? It's nice to put cakes up as a slide, though, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. That's right. There's so much fun outside. Again, what we're trying to do is to get the ones to completely different. And so we're looking at the breadth of what's coming on. So the idea being, we see the same thing across this breadth. We pretty certain it's happening. Let's jump again, Alex. Homogeneous. This time we're just going down one group of cakes. So we're actually getting exactly the same. The idea here is that we'll be able to see the small and intricate differences. So we're looking at one, everything the same, so anything that's slightly different, really show out. So you can see now how it's so crucial to know what your question is before you start. Yeah. And on the slide it says things like patient.
There's a question online for you, Mark.
Fire away.
How might heterogeneous purpose sampling differ from quota sampling? It's from Kristen.
It's a great question. With quota sampling, what we're trying to do is we're trying to represent proportionally. So if we have a population which says 51% females, 49% male, we want our quota to be 51%, 49%. and it would go on into the groupings with.
Heterogeneous.
Thank you, guys. With that one, what we're trying to do there is we're trying to capture all the variation, but not proportionally. Does that answer your question?
Kristen, feel free to
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
YouTube. Yeah.
Yay, thank you. Let's move on to the next one. Typical case. This is what's normal or usual, but you have to define first what normal or usual is in relation to your research question, in relation to the literature you've read, and this, of course, you're doing grounded theory. Because then you build it out of the data, or inductively perhaps. But it's used to illustrate what's typical or usual. So what does a representative leave with? What's a representative student? What's a normal student look like? I just don't think that's possible to define anymore. And then we have critical cases. Now, this is very different. These are ones that are actually important, what you're looking at. So quite often in the work I do, I tend to be like, I forgot your name, sorry.
Fidel.
I tend to do work with organisations. It's fun, and you actually learn a lot. And I'm quite often looking at processes and trying to understand how work with them to enable processes to work better. And in most processes, there are people who are critical to enabling those processes to work better. And there's other people around them. But so that a critical case would be the person who's absolutely critical to make the process work, and so they're important to interview. But again, you have to justify why. And so it's that side of things. They can also be issues because they're going to be really dramatic in the way they talk about things. A relationship manager was a group of people who were working with on things. They were the interface between two groups. So there's an idea of it. Let's jump across. Or we can have politically important. Now, this is not politically important as in governments or whatever happened in America. So forget them. No, I'm being recorded. I'm not going to say anything now. But you know exactly what I would have said. I can see it in the faces. But quite often when we work with organisations in particular, if we want what we're doing to actually have an impact, there are certain people we have to involve in that research because they are the people who actually will enable the findings to be acted upon and happen. And so they're politically important. Or they may be people who will actually enable access. So a lot of the work when I was doing work in the public sector, it was working with the trade union representatives. And I always remember this, it was such a lovely one. There was in working with the trade union as an organisation, and this person said to me, "Why should I allow you to interview my members?" I said, well, I started explaining, "I know you from somewhere." I said, "Oh gosh, I know you." He said, "We were on the picket line together, and after that I got access," and he was really happy. And very supported. So it's also about how you've been passed to access. The other thing which is often left out is this idea of opportunistic sampling, especially with qualitative research. We're interviewing and oh, you really ought to talk to. Because take it up. They've got a label to give it as well, which is really nice. But what we're doing there is it's when something unforeseen happens, take it. It's not like with a question, well, we can't. Here we can actually go, and we may get some data which will just shed the light a little bit we didn't quite understand. And it's really important inductive theory, starting from data and with practice. I'm just coming over to the lovely person on the other side. I'm going to give it the microphone so everybody can hear the questions. Here we are.
So on the earlier slide that you talk about snowball sampling, and I'm wondering whether there's an overlap between opportunistic and snowball, if I understand snowball correctly.
Good question. We will be talking about snowball shortly. There isn't an overlap. They're different things. An opportunistic with one which, oh my gosh, I didn't expect it to. Whereas snowball is an actual process behind it. We'll come and explain the process at the moment. I'm now moving back to the other side specifically. Sorry, now we can ask. Theoretical. Is anybody doing grounded theory here? I can't get my head around it. I find it so difficult to try. My brain doesn't work that way. But I'm really grateful that people do grounded work because it gives us so many useful insights. But you'll understand that then, won't you? Basically, you're starting to build your theory and you're selecting your sample to say, I wonder if it's this. If I collect this data this way from this person or this organisation next, that's going to give me the insights I need to answer that sort of the puzzle and check it. And that was much more words on the slide than that, but did I capture it okay? No, thank you. She says I did well. Excellent. Right. Volunteer sampling. This is one which we're going to be looking at both self-selection and snowball. Now, volunteer sample is, I don't know if it's the same near you, but in the university I work at Birmingham, and in every university I've worked at, when you go into the toilets, there's always this thing. I'm doing my undergraduate dissertation on, if you can help, please take this piece of paper and ring me. That's volunteer sampling. People are volunteering to be part of the sample. More usually, and certainly the way I've used it is you put an advert that's out in a magazine or an online magazine, you put something on LinkedIn, if you're willing to help me, it's not something, you get people to volunteer. But the crucial thing that happens there is your sample is dependent on where you ask for people to volunteer. So if you're asking in the gents' toilets, you're not going to get many women in your sample. But here you'll be all right because they're unisex. There's such toilets for either. But you have to think those ideas through. It's normally used where it's difficult to get access to people and for exploratory. So, and the participants who says it was wrong. Now we're going back to your question with snowball subject. Can we click again? Sorry. I was hoping I could have done this properly with snow falling outside, which would be really nice. Literally with a snowball sample, it's when they're cases to difficult to identify. Work I've done in the past has been with intravenous drug users, so people are going and inject themselves up, but hold down full-time jobs and good jobs. Now, those people don't like to identify themselves. Hey, I shoot heroin up every day, but I'm working with a big manager. It doesn't tend to be said that. But it's a really important group of people who need support to manage their habits, etc., etc. And so to collect that data that way, we use a snowball sample. One person introduced to two, and so each of those two people introduced to two more, you see how a snowball grows. And we did it with two distinct organisations, both of whom said, gave us a person who we could talk to, start off. One organisation, it worked brilliantly. They're a large organisation, but the second organisation, it melted. We had one person, nobody else had come to us. So it depends, but that's the idea of snowballs. But they're brilliant when you've got these people who are difficult to reach. Okay, let's click on. That's halfway up Tryfan in North Wales, which is my favourite mountain. And the rocks look a bit haphazard, so it's an okay illustration. But with haphazard sampling, we've either got, we normally have what we call convenient. We talked about that, I'll say what I can get. But the issue is, how can that actually enable you to answer your question well? Sometimes, what's easy to get or convenient is actually ideal for yourself to answer your research question. And that's probably also another form of sampling as well. So just because it's convenient doesn't mean you have to say it's something else. But recognise that sometimes we can get really great samples. Just thinking, in the 1980s, when most of you weren't even twinkles in my daddy's eyes, and I was doing my PhD, I was talking to my dad, and I said, I really need to get some data on this. He said, oh, why don't you come and talk to my colleagues? You'll get you access to that. And the data was so convenient, just walking down into Dad's office. Convenient, but it was absolutely ideal. And we actually talked about it as being, we explained it actually as this is what happened. But whether we actually were able to sort of talk about them in terms of a heterogeneous sample because of X, Y, and Z. It was also convenient. So you have to think it through. Thing is, though, when you're trying to write about this, especially when you get to a North American journal, and you say, I've got a convenient sample, then they look at it and think, oh, you've got 70 or 80 people for interviews. That's not enough, because it's America. We like the big numbers. And then you get rejected. Yes, rejected. But we'll come back to this numbers and Americans in journals in a minute, because there's ways to actually argue back, and you need to talk about this. And let's jump on now. Right, so where have we got to so far? Research question or research problem is crucial. I dislike research gaps, by the way, because Anybody who's been on the underground has seen lots of gaps and signs saying mind them. It doesn't mean you have to research them. I think a problem or a question that needs answering is much more important than just saying there's a gap. Quite often gaps are there because they're not worth researching. It depends on the Alex stuff, otherwise known as the epistemological or ontological background. So it depends on how you look at the world. And the more I do research, the more I think that is absolutely crucial. And this is from somebody who started life doing a positivistic PhD building statistical models. And I suddenly realised when I worked in social care, those don't work for the questions I'm trying to answer. I can see, Mark, you're thinking the same sort of thing, aren't you? Been through the same journey. Yeah, same like, well, not quite social care, but you know, the idea of saying, hang on, this is enabling me to answer the questions I'm interested in. That's not saying that statistics isn't useful, it's incredibly useful. It just doesn't answer the questions I'm excited by at the moment. And this is something we need to be really aware of, because there's this horrible thing called the pop culture, publish or perish. And if we don't get articles in journals, we don't have jobs. And so we might as well be realistic and say, well, okay, what do we need to do for different journals and different backgrounds? This is me being a pragmatist, by the way. And my lovely colleague here will disagree with me. I've done in the past, we've argued this one through and disagreed with you. But I think it's really crucial to think about, if I'm doing this work, what's going to be enough to get me published? Because I like my work to be read by people. Hopefully lots of them. Preferably they cite it as well as nice because they need a bit of money. So that then raises some important questions. How do we report sample selection in our articles in business management? And it's wider than that. It's right, I would say, across social sciences. How do we report it? And a lot of the time it's done really badly. Then it says that I say, is there a range of, sort of sample size that's okay? How many do we need to have so the editor doesn't say just reject? And then how do we justify what we've done? How do we say, yeah, this is what we've done? And so they can really say, yes, they know what they're talking about. So those are the three questions. Let's click a bit more. Right. This is a wonderful book. Version like Michael Quinbat's book on qualitative evaluation methods. It's great. It is also one of those books which you can get digitally, which is even better still. It means like you can read it anywhere, get it from the library. But when you read Michael Quinbat's book, he says, first of all, it depends on your research purpose. We've already said that. And what's considered authentic by the community, and also what you can do in the time available. That's really crucial. For doctoral students, your PhD should be done within 3 years. It won't be, it'll be done within 4, because that's the amount of time the university lets you have. And if not, you'll be putting in things saying, I'm taking time off from my research and you'll be working flat out on it just to get it finished. Alex will know all the different ways to get around you. If she doesn't yet, well, she will do within a few years. And also the resource available. So, and then they say, look at empirically based guidance to what other people say you should do based on their own research. Look at what other people's studies have done. That's a bit worrying. That's when you look at other studies. Just because it's got published doesn't mean it's any good. Oh, there was one paper a few years ago I used to use in my class because it was so awful. I wanted to get students to critique it. And then I realised that this person was getting such amazing download statistics. Because all the students downloaded the paper to read it. A rubbish paper, so I changed it and used it after all. And then recommendations from people grabbed in the experiences. And oh yeah, those indicate normal to provide some justifications. Click again, please. Yeah, and then this really creases me out because if you read Michael Quinbat's book, it says there are no rules for sample size and qualitative inquiry. And then he says, but you've got to specify a minimum number before you start. How do I do that if there are no rules? Oops, let's carry on. So let's look at qualitative mitigation. We use them in qual research using the mixed methods. I love this idea of an unstructured 3-level change. That means you chat to people. I think that second bullet point is really crucial because it shows how when we write up things, we use a certain language to give ourselves authority in the way we say things. Doesn't it sound better to say, we had an unstructured and free-flowing interchange, we had a chat. You see, it's crucial to actually write with authority so that people believe what you're saying. And then it talks about, comes from Cannon and Kahn in 1957, a conversation with a purpose. But then there's this other bit, because they're unequal. When you're having that research conversation, you actually have the power. You have to remember that. And it's controlled by you. So how do you give people power? That's a different class. And we hope we get authentic insights. We hope we get rich data. In other words, not just lots of data, but data which actually enables us to understand and start to build theory which can be tested later. And we hope it all makes sense. And then we're basically finding out and we're instructing very often realistic tales of how people work. So let's. Hello? No. Somebody wants to ask a question. No, we'll just carry on.
Huh? No?
Somebody's off mute.
Somebody off mute.
Yes.
I will ask her to mute.
Yeah, could all people who are online please mute, because whilst you may be having an interesting conversation, it's putting me off. So we need to know how many when we're planning, just to have an idea. We've got to think of the resources and time and so on. And there's not long. Sorry, I read this slide, so I took it from stuff I'd written and I thought, you don't write when you talk, do you? A paucity of discussion. That means people haven't written much. And lots of items. But basically this is the sort of justification for doing the work. You know, let's have another picture, Alex. And then the other thing is just because, and I think it's very important for this audience to go beyond business and management, but even within business management, different parts of what we do have different ideas of what norms are. And so psychologists tend to want larger samples, and the sociologists come into business management. The economists want a different thing again. So it depends on where you're coming from, where you're aiming to target the journals, because we are a very, very diverse discipline. If indeed we are a discipline at all, but that's another topic, which I like talking about. Let's jump on that. So the other thing is we need, as researchers, to be responsible. We see a lot at the moment about fact checking, don't we? And the first thing was anybody doesn't like the acting speech marks is saying they try and say this isn't true because ... So we need, when we're doing our research, to say exactly how we did it, so people know how much they can believe or not believe, and they understand what we've done. And hopefully they can read our work in the way we did, in the way we intended to, because they understand how we did it. So they're not judging a piece of qualitative work with quantitative judgment credentials. So we have to tell them what we've done. And part of this is about how we view the world, our epistemology and our ontology and so on. But we need to say, how do we choose those potential participants? And we use the word participant because we talk about interviews. If we're using questionnaires, we talk about respondents. Because again, the language shows we know what we're talking about. How we gained access to these people. And it's really nice when people tell the truth. Rather than, I nearly said bullshit, but I'm not going to say that. You know, we have other people ouching up in terms which they didn't really do. So say it as it is. And how the sample was selected, and then the justification for it. So actually explain what you've done and why. And this is really crucial for people coming forward in the future. And if you start to look at, when you read the methodology section, so often there's so little information, you have no idea how they really did it at all. Which is pretty sad, really, because how to judge the work. And there are certain subdisciplines of business management. I've got a paper I'm just finishing up on employee relations, which are notably bad at saying how it is, especially people who are publishing in the old IR journals. Almost like, trust me, I know what I'm doing. And they do, they're doing brilliant work. So that's probably what they've done. And that's a plea to everybody, please. So this is, again, putting together a fair bit of literature into one side. So justify what you've done in relation to the purpose. That's nice and easy. I love this next one from Max Alverson. According to neo-positivistic. It basically is just saying the world is dominated by doing things as positivists do it and having large numbers, etc. And that has a particular way of writing the method. So realistically, that's the way the world works. So explain your method, even if it's qualitative, taking that into account. And you may think, I don't want to do that. That's fine if you don't want to. If you want people to read your work, it's a good idea to think, do I need to sort of bend a little bit? I personally like to bend a little bit. I don't change what I'm saying, but I think I can phrase this in certain ways which will be more acceptable to other people, and they're going to read what I'm trying to write. That's my practice. I'm not saying you have to, I'm just saying think about it. So, how did you gain physical access? How do you select the participants? How do you collect data? It's very obvious, isn't it? A few reflexive acknowledgements to aid transparency. What do I mean by that? Yes, do come in.
Sorry, you said,
Sorry. So you might have to just.
so you just stated that it's very obvious to choose participant. What if you do pioneer work? How you choose participant? How's that obvious?
If you're doing what work?
If you do pioneer, if you do something that hasn't been tested before.
No, right. What I was saying was it's very obvious to me that you should say how you selected them. I'm not saying that the method may be obvious, but and if you're doing pioneer work, I would argue it's even more important you say exactly how you selected them. So, but I think it's, for me, it's obvious that we should be saying how we found the people, how we selected, because we're telling the story of how we got to these participants to collect our data. But good question, thank you for clarifying. So how we selected them, these idea of reflexive acknowledgements. So these are really important. So a lot of work I was doing a few years ago was looking at patient safety and trust, and why on earth it was that people would go into UK national health hospitals and have operations where things went wrong, but they still trusted. What's going on? It seemed very weird. So we were talking to people who'd gone in to have an operation on one leg and they'd taken the wrong leg off. Or that's an extreme case, or they were given the medication which they were allergic to, which was a mistake. So why were they still trusted? But the issue behind that was that Carol and myself, who were doing the work, have both had a background in care and services. She used to work in hospitals as a senior nurse. I worked in social care. And so when we were interpreting the data, we knew that was going to have an impact on how we were looking at these data. So we had the reflective acknowledgement that said, we did these as previous roles, we bring with that a certain amount of baggage and understanding, and that's obviously going to affect how we ask our questions, also the way we're interpreting these data. So we're doing that sort of reflective acknowledgement. Then we have the number and characteristics of the participants. Well, that's sort of a neo-positivistic event. It's how many. And there will be a reference later, if you don't want to say how many, there's a reference you can cite to say you don't have to do it, because it's always nice to give people references to do what they want. And how you select them, we talked about different sampling strategies, and then the reasons for choices. And the crucial thing is we often have to write these research plans on what we're going to do, justify how many before we've done it. We need to know how many are enough before we start. You can't just say I'm going to collect the saturation. You need. Let's jump along a bit now. Thanks. Okay, you read that and answer the question, and you can answer the question which is surrounded in red as yes, no, and you can't have not sure. So you can either be a yes or a no. And for people who are online, you can just type in the chat a Y or an N. And you're lucky because I can't, you don't have to put your hand up. You've had a chance to read it through. Okay, have you got any votes online yet?
Yeah, voting 2, right, no.
2 no's. Any yeses on that? Yeah. Right. How about in the room? How many people think this is not publishable? Hands up if you don't think it is publishable. 1, 2, 3. Hands up those who think it is publishable. 1. Hands up those who are too scared. 2. Too scared to put their hands up. Yeah. Okay. So there's a few. Okay. Next slide now. In Human Relations in 2003. A fantastic paper by Tony Watson. Alex, you wasn't voting because you didn't get it. It's a lovely paper. And this is how the argument was put through. So it's in a bit more detail about there. But the crucial thing here is what is happening in this paper is it's an example to prove that it could happen. So it's you only need the one. It's a bit like you only need one black swan to prove that black swans exist. So let's move on. So let's look at now how we might report sampling in a paper. And it's with Zenib. It's with Zenib Jabali, who's a former doctoral student of mine, who did a gorgeous PhD on later life social entrepreneurs. And this is some of the work coming out of there. So, as you can see, purposive sampling actually doesn't reference me, horrible.
Sorry, Mark, we have a question for the speakers.
Okay, jump in.
I jump in. The question that comes to my mind is the spinner is what sample did that study use? Approach and methods to collect data too. So.
Well, I think what that previous one illustrates is how poorly in the early noughties people actually writing that method. It was a sample of 1. We don't know how to select anything. We just chosen the tool, so it doesn't tell us anymore. Okay, so how access was gained. So it's a contact by a third sector organisation, obviously kept anonymous through confidentiality reasons, and 2 inclusion criteria. So the inclusion criteria are linked to the purpose, nature, and so on. And then 91 identified, 28 agree. And then the crucial thing is now, increasingly we're seeing in journal articles, a table giving details of the research participants, so you can actually see who they are. And then when you look at the juicy quotes, you can see who said what. Okay, there's one example. This is another one of my former doctoral students, Dave, who's now permanent. One of Alex's, one of our doctoral students. Yeah, it's rather nice. And this is talking about her method. We gained access to 2 leading UK consultant firms through senior members who are gatekeepers. One of those was her husband. That's in the thesis of the journal. Without influence in data collection, which I think is important, because that's saying these gain us access they weren't saying who need to. Aimed at achieving, yeah, you can see it. I highlighted 3 themes across varied experiences, so we're showing we know what heterogeneity got it. And then providing about insights, 30 interviews from these companies, expanded to 50 things. It doesn't say actually how that was done, but yeah. Diverse sample, then talk about sample. And then we get a new thing here. Theoretical saturation was achieved by this 26 interview. So that means in terms of the theoretical understanding, no more new theories. But notice it goes on to 50 participants. And this is really important because quite often, as we do more interviews, we get better at it. And we get better at understanding what people are saying and also the nuances. So those new interviews have given us more nuanced understanding. They just weren't giving us, we saturated before, we get more insights still from them on the minute type of detail. But anyway, it's a way of doing it. Oh, that one's just come out in Wales Working Common Society. Yes.
Can I ask a really quick question?
Yeah, thanks.
Just a profiles and the fact that you mentioned the importance of mentioning participant characteristics. What sort of characteristics are worth mentioning? Because there may be hundreds of things to say: blue eyes, tall, exactly, different management levels, maybe different functional areas. So, what sort of things do you think should be included in?
That's a wonderful question. What sort of things should be included in the characteristics? Well, if we look at this one, there's obviously a code. You can code to link us back so we can link it back to the quotes. This one was looking at the importance of different levels within the consulting firm. So we have the grade. Then we were looking to see anything on age and the experience and gender. So you can see that was what it links back to the research question. The other one was linking back to a different research question. So that we were reporting different characteristics. So the short answer is it depends, but that's a longer answer. Okay, let's click on that. So how do we justify them? We're going back to my recap again. Depends on purpose, what's the digital, incredible. Slide 4, sorry, jump on. Jump. Yeah, let's have a look at the literature. This is reasonably up to date, which is quite scary because there's not very much new stuff. And so, we have to go right across the whole of social sciences to find out what's going on. So we go back 20 years nearly. And if you look at school psychology, 40% weren't reported sample size. That's a bit scary. Then we look at another study looking at health and social science, pretty much everybody is, but there's no, these are all about empirics and looking at what recommendations. They don't recommend any recommendations about what to do about sampling. Marsha, that's an IT-based one. And here, one view, 20 to 30 interviews for grounded theory and 15 to 30 for case study. I always get quite worried when people have numbers of ones and zeros, but then that's what we used to do stats. It means people are rounded. But we'll come, I do the same myself. Suffman and Sobel. Right. Qualitative studies. Sample size 2 to 720 for qualitative research. It's not my understanding of qualitative research. I don't think you can do that many interviews, but
Median 50.
yeah. But I think some of those studies weren't qualitative. Oh, talking of which, I wrote a paper, and I put some stats in it, and it came back from one of the reviewers saying, you have used the incorrect stats. You should be using a mean median. I thought, what the? I wasn't know this one. So I walked around the corridor to one of my colleagues who's a human being who really likes stats. I said, Sarah, have you heard of a mean median? She said, no. She said, let's look it up. So we Googled it, and there was nothing. So then I thought, I need to ask a clever statistician. I emailed Catherine, who I've known for a long time. I said, Catherine, please help me. What's the mean median? I've no idea, Mark. So I then read back to the editor and said, they're telling me to put a mean median in, but I can't find out what it is. And everybody I've spoken to who's a good statistician says that they don't know what it is. I said, can I just say that? He said, no. You have to find a justification for not doing it, which will not, and the exact phrase you used was piss them off. Upset them, in other words. So I thought, so in the end, I went through a whole year's worth of journals looking at the stats they used. And I said, having gone through a whole year's worth of journals, in this context, this stat has never been used. Therefore, I followed the common parlance and used normal stats, and I got away with it that way. So sometimes you have to write very nice things to idiots just to keep them all tight. Okay, and then Saunders and Townsend. This is the paper Keith and I wrote. And that paper went through. Oh gosh, hang on. It went through 3 different journals. And it went through, I think it went through 4, on British Journal Management, it went through 4 rounds of review before it got published. And we nearly gave up. But now it's got over 900 citations, so it's obviously worth it. I'll tell you a story about it, I've actually got time. And you can see I can't sample. But what we've done was sample size varied between 1 and 330 for interviews. And the ones from North America were the ones sample size. Let's move on. A few more. Now, this is about data saturation. If anybody's looking at data saturation, Francis's paper is brilliant. It's fantastic about how to actually show you reach saturation and how to prove it. So on. We'll come back to that in a while. Guest et al. Is absolutely hilarious. Because so often I've examined about 4 PhDs now, which all cite guest as justification for their sample size. So I see it, I say, can you tell me why you used guest? and how it relates to your own sample of managers. And they say, oh, we're doing managers. I said, what do guests do? No, guests collected data on managers. I said, no, guests collected data on Nigerian and Ghanaian sex workers. And if you can explain to me how a manager is like a sex worker, we're fine, but if not, please read your papers in future. So the thing is there, please, if you're using something in reference to it, read it. And don't say it's a similar sample, because I don't believe sex workers and managers are the same sort of sample. Nobody's been able to justify that yet to me. Guest has done some more work there. He's still talking about this. I think is lovely. Saturation depends on how you code it. So if you code in more detail, you're less likely to get saturation. Which makes sense. The more detail you have, the more variation you're going to have in your code, so you're less likely to reach data saturation. And then marginal saturation that comes after 15-ish interviews. Yes.
We have a question about what is data saturation.
Okay, what is data saturation? Data saturation is defined as when you are collecting data from a series of participants, you get no new cases, so that each new participant doesn't tell you anything new in terms of data codes. So you reach saturation, you're getting nothing new. And the rough rule of thumb is you carry on collecting data for 3 more participants after you've reached saturation, just to make sure there's nothing new coming. Yes.
So then the question is data saturation necessary for your PhD?
No, when you justify why you're not. Because in my view, you often find out some really interesting things, which are still well worth talking about, even if you haven't reached data saturation. So, no, it's not necessary. But you need to have a justification for it, and you need to find a reference that says that.
Yeah.
And me saying in this is not a good enough reference for a PhD. Sorry. Okay, jump on. Now, this is where almost all the information comes from, unsubstantiated recommendations. And you'll notice a lot of these are around about the 2012. That's because the ESRC commissioned a report on how many samples was about, in size was enough. And the end result of that report was, here's what a lot of people think. There wasn't any empirics behind it, and that's not very helpful. But what makes me laugh on this is, isn't that wonderful there? Isn't laugh? This is a great reference. Becca says you only need 1. Right, that's it. No. But you've got to justify that to your examiner as well. All the reviewers. That was some early work. Usually about 36. It's quite fun. It's nice, interesting to see that Creswell from grounded theory started off saying 20, now he's gone up, increased the size a bit. And then case study 3 to 5K. But at least these are only what people are thinking. So let's move on and look at what the literature says. There's an absence of reporting in studies, and that's still going on. Although in the last few years, things are getting better, thank goodness. I think it's probably because word limits have been relaxed. Journals are online, so you can publish longer papers slightly. There's very little empirical evidence of how many you need. Most recommendations are based on guessing, and this is what I reckon, rather than actual data. And there's always caveats of, well, it depends, which is probably most researchers' favourite answer. It depends. And we have to think very carefully about what different communities expect. So which book publishing. Certainly when I was working in social care, they loved the qualitative work. They needed numbers as well to convince people to give money out. And that's what the community wanted. So we basically put some stats in it to give the overview, and then we have the qualitative work to explain what's happening. So we did a lot of mixed methods, because that's what the community needed. So you have to think about what is the community need. And here's another reference. James Sick is a gorgeous reference, isn't it? This argument that justifying participant numbers are better detracts from the story being told. Now, I challenge anybody to be stupid enough to put that in their thesis. Oh, I'm not doing it because James Sick says it takes away from my thesis and story. I don't. Do you think that's a good idea? That's pretty good, Brad, to say problem. But you see, And there's a reference there. Most people, you can normally find a reference to justify whatever you want. Doesn't mean you should do it though. Let's click again. So I looked at these journals, Keith. So we selected these, and there's a whole justification to select them. But basically, we're looking at top ranked journals, 3s and 4s on the ABS list, or the Australian Business Deans list, which is ABDC list, top ones. And we've got General Management, HRM, and Employee Relations, and all studies journals. Let's have a little click. And this is looking at interview studies. Note how few interview studies are relatively from North American based journals, or journals where they're at all bases in North America. The number of interview studies goes down relatively. And there is very much, it's important when you start publishing this, and if you are already, I'm sorry, but to teach you to suck eggs, but there's a very noticeable difference between North American and European journals, the number of qualitative studies that come out. It's worth remembering that. Click again. So we coded them. We coded them on the actual number of interviews where it was said. We looked at have they actually justified the past selection explicitly, implicitly, or none at all. We started off saying explicitly or not, and there were so few we had to put more implicity in because so few were doing it. We always look at implicit justification as well. We looked at, and we looked at in recommendations that have been made based on justification, based on recommendations, based on previous studies, and based on saturation as well. We looked at whether it was one organisation, multiple organisations, one sector, multiple. So we're looking at, you know, their homogeneous and the other one samples, and how they were data and analysed, one group, multiple groups. How was the issues done, one-to-one, face-to-face, online? So we're looking at all the sorts of different and how the interviews are structured. And in all honesty, we could probably done this better now because I understand how interviews are sorted out. Because a few years ago now, so I've learned. Let's click again. Yeah. And these were done. Let's move on. 244 articles reported in 248 studies. Nice numbers. 197 used, one form, 47 used, 2 forms, 4 used, 3 forms meeting. So predominantly one form interview. 85% told you how they did the interviews. And of those 85%, they're pretty much one-to-one interviews. Boring. But I think it's very interesting how conservative small C people are in the way they're doing it. So you made a point about doing new stuff and interesting. People aren't. Sad. They say that how whether it was semi-structured or unstructured for about 2 out of 5. And when those that did then need all semi-structured, so basically we're doing semi-structured one-to-one indicator, one-to-one indicator. This is where it gets a bit scary. Remember, these are 3 and 4 journals, they're good journals from the answers, and yet only 3/4 are reporting the numbers. And nearly 20% aren't telling you how many we've got journals. I think that's bad. That's something we need to know so that we can read and understand and research with an open mind of what's been done. Let's have another look. And here's an approximate indication. The number of response interviews between the companies range from 6 to 16. Or over a dozen interviews. Well, that could be 13, it could be 130. Personal interview, this one I think that was quite interesting because this is somebody who was doing anthropological type research where they're actually working and researching the company full time over a long period. And you won't even note every single interview. So it's personal interviews the author did over the course of a decade usually. So you don't expect always. So you have to not say you must do it. You have to be more open to alternatives. Thanks, Alex. Right, how they justified it. Very few actually justified in relation to purposes. I like that. This is one of the better ones. Better by my judgment, by the way. In total, 58 interviews were undertaken in addition to interview conversations and discussions through personal observation into single in-depth case study. A section of interviews was made on the basis of including key figures involved in stratification. So now we go back to the sample type, and this is critical case sampling. So when I say critical cases, because then you link back to sampling literature. And then this is a major British symphony orchestra. That was it. Here's actual relation to purpose. And this was someone looking at, I love this one, it's so beautifully clear. 37 GLDT people were trained for their ordination by obtaining a master's degree and applying for permission to the formal candidacy process in their respective ordination. You know exactly what's been done, it's brilliant. That's quite a nice one. Well, 3 product lines in the grocery supply chain. Notice fish processing, vegetable processing, distribution, warehousing. In each of these 3 product lines, 3 in-depth case studies, we know exactly what's happening. You don't need lots of words, you just need to be clear. I'm along here. 4.2%. Virtually none justified the number of interviews through saturation. And when they do, it's like this. However, we felt we did not need more because interviews with our informants nicely fitted into categories we built during the last phase, and we felt category saturation had occurred. No proof. Yeah, we reckon we've got there, like guys. All right, let's go have a beer. There was, and yet it's so straightforward to justify and show it. Let's jump on. Very rarely looked at other studies to justify. This other study had this number, shall we? And here's another one here. Research approach which focuses on development of rich descriptions and is sensitive to subtleties and situated nuances of leadership practice has been adopted. However, small-scale qualitative studies in the interpretive tradition do not allow for generalizability. Their strength lies in their capacity to provide insights, rich details and descriptions. And that's basically it. But it's clearly not what we're doing. So are there norms that we can adjust which might help us? First is view stats. Look at the variability on that. I mean about 45, 46. But look at the standard deviation, it's 48, so it's massive variability. Look at probably better to be honest, to look at the quartiles, but it's variability from 18 from 57, variability in sample size. And so if you look at, you could say, well, there's a norm between about 15 and 60. It's big. So let's look a bit further. And we can do it by different sorts of one organisation, multiple organisations and so on. But all that data really says is that if you've got a homogeneous population, you need a smaller sample than a less population, which is blindingly obvious. But it's still important because now we have an idea that we've actually got data that proves that if you're going for homogeneity, you need smaller. If you go for heterogeneity, you need a larger sample. Let's jump on it. So what does this mean? In terms of reporting, they're not doing it very often. How you gain access. Nearly things aren't reported on release days. Certainly the work I'm doing at the moment looking at this in entrepreneurship it appears the numbers going up. More people are saying how many they've got now. Perhaps they've been preparing that. Or perhaps actually realising it's crucial to actually do this if you want data to be believed. For studies using 2 or more forms of interview, it becomes even less likely to report them. And I think it's crucial for authenticity and credibility. Sorry, quickly again, please. Wherever practical research should outline how you gain physical access. Number 2, report participant numbers precisely. Number 3, those tables we showed earlier, the participant characteristics. But it links back to your research question. Okay, so that's the first bit. Next one. Justifying it. Very rarely done. And the most important is when we collect these, it means we can answer our question. So it means for research purpose. And they don't say recommendations of research studies. So that's changing. As 940 citations shows the reference us. Showed it was useful. Let's jump on a bit. So justify the number of participants explicitly in relation to the research purpose. Consider the potential utility of, so think about, is it going to make sense to look at what experts have said, to look at what similar studies have done, and data saturation supported by clear evidence. So it's saying justify it. Let's carry on a bit more. And then this data shows a wide variety of business management. Less from singles and multiple, that's heterogeneity, homogeneity. I got there in the end. Been two. And for some research purposes, 1 or 2 is sufficient. It's really important to remember that. I think the smallest number of any PhDs I've examined has been 4. It was a great PhD, but that's 4 organisations. And they look at it at an organisational level. And large numbers on these data suggest quantification of quantitative data, I think, more than anything else. Let's jump on. So, this is so academic, isn't it? Recognising there will be exceptions. It's so academic. But research is normally between 50 and 60. If you've got one organisation, 30 is about right-ish when you're planning, and 50 if you've got 2. But beware, you might have to go to, if you're thinking of saturation, think about that as well. You may have to carry on with that. Jump again. And here's the simple way to say data saturation. Graph on the vertical axis is the number of themes encoded. On the horizontal is which participant number. So we see the first interview gave us 10 themes. The second gave us 13 new themes. On the third, we only had 1 new theme. And then along 8th, we had none, but 9th, we had another new theme. And then eventually at the end, we got on to nothing coming through. Very straightforward trend for each saturation, isn't it? And then you've got the proof. You can get back to your coding scheme and your data diagrams and coding diagrams and so on. So it all goes through. This is much more likely to be in a thesis rather than a journal article. It's a nice, simple way of showing it. Okay, Alex. Right, quick summary, which non-probability sampling and making generations to build theory. We're not about doing generations to a population to accept practical quotas. Depends on research purpose, what's going to be useful, what's authentic and credible, and time and resources. And we've got the 2 third a norm, and then we should state and justify with recommendation experts, precedents as early studies, or data saturation. And jump on more. Some references. These are all there. I mean, first one is Needs thesis with myself and Reinhardt. And that's really quite fun, that paper. Then the Bacon Edwards ones is fantastic for citations. Brinkman and Cavell is my favourite one. It's gorgeous. I love it because it's interviews as well. I just posted on the title. And Cunliffe is great on gaining data access. I put that in there. Then there's Zenith's doctorate on starting off and slowing down, but that's the other example we have to look at portfolios. Then there's the Francis paper on what's an adequate sample size. Try to count the next one. Guest and bugs, that's the one on the garden, Nigerian gardens. Field workers and text workers, and there's their paperwork. Some more work on saturation. I thought it was fun to put that in somewhere, the next one. Might as well. And then there's the work that Keith and I have done, and so on. And then the little, what should I call it, QR code is to the website on YouTube, because there's loads. I've done 54 videos now on it. Some of you have seen them, I know, a few not in. New one comes each week. And I think that's pretty much it, other than if there's any more questions and things. Thank you for staying with me, guys. Hopefully it was some use.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Fantastic. Questions? Any questions on that?
Yeah, we have questions. Actually, we have 3 questions online.
So we start with the online ones?
Yeah. So
Do you want to read them out? And then we'll come back to the room.
yeah. So the first question is Mohammed, and also the second one, but let's start with the first. What is the relationship between data saturation, the dimensionality of the data, and the kind of features? Features.
Relationship between data saturation, dimensionality, right, and the type of features. I think what this is looking at relationship to saturation, having homogeneous data and heterogeneous data. So it's basically looking at the relationship between data saturation and variability in the data. And when we're collecting data from a homogeneous population, one which is very similar, we're looking for nuances. So we'll probably be coding in a lot more depth and detail and intricacy, looking for the hetero, etc. one. And so the relationship is that we will probably have similar size to get to data saturation. It's just that our coding is going to be different in terms of the depth, intricacy, and detail of our coding. As you come back on that.
I don't know, Mohammed, I don't know if you want to switch on your mic.
Yeah, thank you so much for the interesting presentation and for answering the questions. So I'm more toward qualitative analysis, so AI machine learning person. So the question is, where the dimensionality of the data is getting bigger, that will increase the variation within the data. So is it possible to reach the data saturation in this case as the dimensionality is high?
It depends on how much detail you code it in. Because you can code with a very broad, when the data is very broad dimensionality, and you can code broadly. And if you're coding at the same level of detail for data which got broad dimensionality versus data which is very narrow, then you're obviously going to get a much larger number of codes for broad dimensionality too.
Yeah, because in data science we tend to say the size of the data is related to the dimensionality. So when you have high dimensionality, you need to have lots of data points, like 2 to the power of the dimensionality. I don't know whether that is still applicable or not, to avoid having like the curse of dimensionality later on when you code.
I think I see where you're going through. I think what we're doing is we're treading into that really difficult boundary between when data is qualitative, when we're doing qualitative research versus quantitative quantifying. And I think that's what's probably happening there, because what we've seen with data science now is amazing ability to take qualitative data and quantify it and do some amazingly wonderful stuff with it in terms of coding, statistical analysis and so on. And so it's opening up new opportunities to do things very differently. But what we've been talking very much about today was about going into depth and detail and looking at intricacies within. So we're looking at richness of data rather than categorizing and quantifying large amounts of data, big data and so on like that. So I think that's where the differences are coming through.
Okay, thank you.
And there is also a question from Kristen that she asks, how non-probability sampling will evolve with our ability to analyze large qualitative data sets, for example, with artificial intelligence?
I've been playing, I don't know, I think it's more like playing with AI and getting to analyze qualitative chunks of data just to see what happens. And it's remarkable what it can do, but it isn't very good at getting the nuances in the data and the understanding, because it's looking for patterns rather than looking for the understanding within the words. So we've got a way to go yet, but it's getting better and better at what it does. But the real fear I have with the AI, and in particular Gen AI, is it's based on algorithms, based on norming. And a lot of the insights we gain are not from normings, they're gained from the unusuals and the outliers, and it isn't able to pick those up yet. Thank you to the people who nodded in the room when I said that.
And we have an additional question online that is Olga. Olga, I don't know if you would like to share, because I think you can give a bit of an overview of the research and that is connected to your question.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
And indeed,
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. Yeah, sorry, I should not meant interesting, but it was interesting presentation. Thank you. Just a question. We have a very interesting project related to SMEs and hazardous waste sustainability. However, we were able to reach only 4 SMEs in Somerset. Despite the fact that we tried hard, only 4 SMEs volunteered. I'm just wondering if we just justify that this is volunteering sample, is it sufficient to make any claims, or any additional data should be collected, or how we are approaching this kind of low number of participants?
I think it's really what that data is showing is a crucial thing. If you're not finding much out of your data, there's not a lot of point. So it's very blunt. I think the real issue there is it showing you useful and interesting insights you didn't realise before, which can then be argued to say, here is something that needs to be looked in more detail for these reasons. And this is a sort of insightful theory which is given saying, hey, this theory doesn't work this way for these reasons. We need to do more work on it. That's how I read it. I do think that the biggest problem you'll have on that is making sure you have a journal who will actually say, yes, this is interesting and worth running with, rather than saying it's a sample before getting lost.
I see.
That was me being blunt.
Okay. So yeah, no, I will have a discussion with my colleagues. It just intriguing, the word volunteering. I thought it would be maybe something which you need to justify more than just say that it's volunteering or purposive sampling.
You might want to look at it a different way and actually talk about 4 different organisations and what they're doing. And these 4 organisations volunteered, and as though they volunteered, right? When we look at them, they actually show a breadth in these ways against these statistics. So you actually start to say, yes, we had volunteers, but despite that, we had 4 volunteer organisations. One was looking at this, one was looking at that, one was looking at that. Therefore, we have a breadth of ideas. We can actually start to say something interesting. It's a lot of it is how you look, how you argue what you're doing in relation to answering the question and building an argument up.
Thank you, Mark. Very, very insightful. Thank you.
Okay, questions from the room? Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to reach, but
I can give it a go.
I think that's about time to get sorry.
It's fine.
So I'm doing research on quite an intimate, personal area. And I've spoken to some people in my department because I was originally going to do one-on-one interviews, and some people are saying that maybe group interviews would be better to create more of a kind of community environment. And I know most of this presentation kind of inferred one-on-one interviews, but I wondered if you have any advice for group ones, any interpretations.
And that's a really interesting question. It brings out the issue of doing research on intimate or difficult to research topics. And it also brings out the impact of doing interviews in groups rather than individually. You've got 2 distinct things interacting. It's very difficult to talk on microphone. But I think the first thing is to think very clearly about what impact having people in a group will have on the responses you get. Especially given the intimacy of the topic, because normally what happens with group interviews is you get groupthink, and so people will say the same thing, and they don't like to be embarrassed in front of other people. So it depends on the sort of intimacy they're talking about. So that's the first thing as to whether group interviews. I would want to look into a lot more detail what other people have said on that before I went any further. The issue though with group interviews is, you can actually all focus anything that you want to focus group. I think a group interview makes sense. The issue then is, if you choose to do it, what impact will it have on the data you get versus doing individual interviews? Especially given it's that sensitive topic.
The other thing is be aware of. I found that when I interviewed on sensitive topics, I was more sensitive about it than the people I'd interviewed, which I think is worth remembering.
Thank you.
It's reached you, you know that we tried already.
It's not really a question, but just a thought, a sort of provocation really, because your session is all about specifically about interviewing, and we've been talking about saturation and interviewing and that kind of thing. But if you're not taking a relatively separated view as a researcher or position as a researcher, in terms of gathering data from your participants and then analysing it, if you're taking a different approach, then it may be different in terms of how many participants you want and what you're looking for. So I completed my PhD, so we shouldn't talk about ourselves, but just say I did put it out there and said it's a different angle in your research, Onion, is that I did it grounded theory combined with action research. So you're actually taking action and learning with your participants as you go along, rather than individual sequences of collecting data. And then the number of participants was much lower. And in fact, my completed PhD was with 11 participants, because we all went along in a collaborative inquiry process, and then I conceptualised it and justified all of that. So it just depends. You say, you know, people don't necessarily sort of take different approaches, but if you are taking a different approach, then you can justify a completely different way of looking at it, if that's makes sense. And you don't have to sit there trying to get 30 interviews. You know, you're being a specialist researcher, you're collecting all your data, you're analysing it, you're collecting the data from the participants in a separated way. If you're doing it co-research and co-production and co-design of a solution, then it might be a completely different ballgame that you're thinking about. So I just wanted to kind of chuck them in there as a different approach. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. And I haven't seen your research onion this afternoon, Mark, but I absolutely love it. And I've been working with that since 2015 or so, and it's a lovely.
I think that I'm so glad you said that, because I think what this was showing with the data was that people don't do what you did. The vast majority of people are doing face-to-face, one-to-one interviews.
Yeah.
I think I made the point sad.
Yeah.
And you were talking about alternative ways of doing research, different methods. We should be doing more. But the reality is people are not going to get published at all.
Sorry,
Which is it's incredibly sad.
can you say that again?
The reality of it is that people are not publishing it
Right.
so much.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the world, and it's wrong. There's no way around it.
That doesn't mean that you can't.
It doesn't mean you can't. Yes, exactly.
I'm laughing, but I'm kind.
You don't need to, you can.
You can get things published, but I mean, the paper that some of that was based on, it went to 3 journals who just said no. I mean, it went to organisational research methods. I thought, oh, if I can get me there. They said no. Try the Journal of Management Inquiry. So I said Journal of Management Inquiry. They said try the organisational research methods. What do you want me to do? But what you do find is, as you start to do things which are a bit more unusual, I didn't think this was, but with other papers, I mean, you've done some really fun stuff with them, like taking rep grid work, which is really, really qualitative, and quantifying it. We thought that was really fantastic fun to do it. Trying to get into a journal was an absolute pain. Managed it eventually, because we're out of the ordinary, and I think that's the fight being the ordinary. It's been different. But remember that you need to have the papers if you want to get jobs, and that's unfortunately the world we're living in. And my lovely friend here is very good at not doing that.
You absolutely can get the research done differently published, but you need to know, you need to target particular journals or even specific editors. So it is possible. It just takes a bit more thinking, and you still absolutely need to justify what you do. I think you made that point in Mark, that if you step out of the usual pathway, if you step off the conveyor belt, then the need to justify what you've done is even more crucial, because it tends to get questioned more. Yes, so in a way, some of these people would get away with not justifying because they were doing really bog standard stuff, I would guess. And so there was less questioning of, oh yes, we've seen this lots of times before, or we're not going to question it. But if you're doing something different, then you absolutely need to justify it, and you need to gather your allies. And allies, other people who have done things differently, other people who have stepped off the conveyor belt, and there are people like that. Even if you're doing pioneering stuff, there would have been other pioneers. You need to find them. You need to gather them together in your references. You need to find out where they're hanging out, which conferences. You need to find out where they publish. And some of the journals where they publish are really good journals that will get you jobs. So I'm here. I got a job. I'm very happy here. I've got publications. It took me a long time to get those publications. It took me about 6 years to get published. And now I've got plenty. But, it is absolutely possible. And from my perspective, it's absolutely, well, to me, it's absolutely fundamental to the research that I'm passionate about. And that's research that's done differently. But, yeah. So let's make 2 pennies worth.
I think it's important that came in there, Alex. I really do.
I'm loud enough so everybody can hear me.
I wasn't going to say that.
I like both the options, but realistically, for new researchers that don't have the name to do something bold and new, they have to follow a pattern. And unfortunately, that's the reality. And the problem is that we have an idea, but it's molded in that way, so we can actually get published. So you can try and try and try, but no one does. No one knows me, who I am. And I already published 3 articles by following not that, which I had initially, but fitting inside the box. And if I want to do more, I have to fit that box. And it's getting tired to fight and over, but I applaud the people that they do.
Let's come back on that. Yes, but.
Francesca, you've muted.
But if you're doing good research and you can justify it well, what you've done, wherever you're getting published somewhere, a lot of it is the attrition of going through things. So, I mean, we did a paper. I still think it's one of my favourite papers. It's on arguing that you can be both trusting and distrustful at the same time, which there's a massive debate about it. I did some empirical stuff. And that paper went through about 6 or 7 journals. I got really annoyed because everybody rejected it. So I sent it to Human Relations, got in a bad mood. And they accepted it. You just have to, there's a lot of luck in getting the right editor on the right day. The paper here only got published in British Journal of Management because I happened to sit next to the editor on the bus. And we talked about everything. He said, "Oh, what work are you doing at the moment?" So I'm going to start and say, "How many interviews?" And I said, "Oh, that's interesting. Have you thought of publishing in British Journal of Management?" "No, I haven't." He said, "I think that would be interesting. Why don't you send me a copy?" That's the reality of how it works. So you have to go to conferences, you have to talk to people, you have to be listened and present your work. And somebody will come up. Neve, one of our doctoral students, she did a paper at a conference on the epistemologies of trust researchers, which was basically an assignment she did for a master's in research methods. And she got a bit carried away, didn't she? They were supposed to take 1 or 2 journal articles and look at epistemological underpinnings. She did 60 or 70, wasn't it? That's Neve for you. And then we said, "Why don't you present this as a paper at a conference?" The editor came up, the journal came up and said, "That was really interesting. Do you think she'd be interested in publishing in my journal?" So we'll go and have a chat with her. That's how it happens. People listen. Nobody had ever published on epistemology research before, but Nina did, because she was interested by it. I think if ideas will get there, they may not go in the top journals, but then if they get cited a lot, you get that gets negated.
I think Leslie had a.
Sorry, Leslie.
Just going to say that there's a really good paper about, I'm trying to remember the name, but I think it's by Jorgen Sandberg about box breaking research in business and management studies. So he's talking about breaking the boxes or staying inside the boxes. So that's a really good one. But also I'd say as a completer, I'd say in the OU, in that open university, it's fairly suicidal to try and get around to the books. And then it's so conservative.
Right, I'm going to come back to you on
So
this.
that's provocative as well, but that's my experience. And I'm sitting 2 years after completion. So.
Okay, out the box now completely. My first academic job was in a college of higher education. And it had the wonderful name of Cheltenham and Gloucester College of Higher Education. It rolls off the tongue beautifully. Not. And we were told you must publish journal articles. That's all the maths. Don't write books, complete waste of time. I wrote a textbook on research methods, which the publisher reckoned I was hawked that around every single publisher in the UK. Also, there was no equivalent like that. And then eventually a rep came up, a woman called Cara Reed, and she said, "Oh, can I show it to my boyfriend who works at another university?" She emailed and said, "Oh, it's quite interesting. Why don't you write a blog?" I took it down to Pitman's and they said, "We might sell 3,000-4,000 copies in 5 years. We'll go with it." We sold 6,000 in the first 6 months. We've now sold 500,000. So if you've got a dream, run with it. Don't listen to other people.
I think on this note, yeah. Now back to you for closing.
So thank you so much, Mark, for today. Thank you, Alex, as well. So I think we are closing. So this is the first event. We are gonna launch all the methods masterclass, and they will be open to all the faculties. So we will disseminate to all the faculties. We're gonna have the next one in February. We are keeping Tuesday as a research Tuesday. So keep an eye on that, because the idea is to populate with different events for Research Tuesday. For FBL colleagues, tomorrow there is an online about how to write papers, and it's around qualitative research, and it's from a colleague from DAF. So with an accounting perspective, on how to write qualitative papers. So you should all receive information. If you don't, you know where to find me online or in person. So thank you so much today. Thank you, Mark, again.
Really well done, and thank you to you, Francesca and Alex, and your
Will we